Thank you, Chair. Minister, in 2019, I went on the first of many site visits to a tract of land at Pine Plantation Road with a view. This visit included the Ministry of Housing, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Transport, Works, and at the time, Water Resources, and others. We've since been several times again. A minimal amount of work was started and maintained, and many of the residents of Pine Gardens are grateful that the property has been kept low, that the number of fires and issues with flooding has been reduced, but that was not the ultimate outcome that we had in mind. The ultimate outcome was that we would establish shade houses through the Ministry of Agriculture, that we would also have a park installed. This is since 2019. And that the matter had to be triggered by the vesting of the land by the Ministry of Housing in whatever would be the entity that would take responsibility for the project. I raise this now because the tract of land, while the constituents of Pine Gardens have benefited, the truth is that that land stretches all the way over to the backs of the residences of those residents along Cullimer Rock. You will understand that constituents feel that there might be two St. Michael South Centrals because one set of residents has gotten relief and the others, their property is not being maintained, and there's no long-term plan for how people in Cullimer Rock are going to get relief from the overgrown land. The fact is that there's a health services amendment bill before the Senate right now that's about to be passed that says that we all need to be responsible for the land that we own and for maintaining it. And I would hate to see that the government of Barbados and the Ministry of Housing is breaking its own law. Can you give us some insight on what is happening there, please?
There are two things there, and I will allow the Permanent Secretary to speak on the whole aspect of the transfer or the vesting of the land in the right authority with respect to the shared houses. But you are right, we have to lead by example, and constantly we are looking at ways in which we can, identify our land. Sometimes I must say to you, there are some areas of Barbados where, I am happy that the digital parcel fabric is in place now so we can identify all of our lands, but we have to find a way to maintain our properties. And if we have to put a charge on ourselves for that, then that must be done to let us know that we have to keep our properties and lead by example. But the whole aspect of the vesting, I would allow the Permanent Secretary to speak to you on that, because he has thorough knowledge of that vesting and as to when or why it wasn't vested. So over to you, Permanent Secretary. And I'm not throwing him under the bus, just that he has the knowledge.
Thank you, Minister. Nikki Smith, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Housing. The question asked by the Honourable Member is a valid question. We have been a little swamped to get things done. The area at the Pine is to be surveyed so that it can be vested in the BADMC for the particular purpose of having the shade houses put in place. And this is one government entity to another. I would actually like to suggest that because we have been a little slow does not stop the process. In fact, the BADMC, we can have a discussion with them so that they can start placing the shared houses so that when the surveying is done early in the new financial year, the lands can then be vested.
This is meant to be one government that has recently installed senior ministers that are meant to coordinate these things across ministries. I would hate to think that we all sit together all the time and we have to come here to hear that the Ministry of Agriculture could have gone ahead years ago, but we thank you for the answer. I'll move on quickly. Minister, there has been a lot said in your responses today, and I thank you and the officers here for the responses. But I will tell you honestly that while there's been a flood of information, I feel no greater sense of clarity on the overall housing master plan of the government. When I say that, what I mean is there have been a lot of numbers called, this number of houses here, that number of houses there, but as against what target or as against what benchmark? And I'm not asking this to be academic at all. I'm asking this because every week on Wednesday evenings in Tweedside Road, I sit in a constituency clinic to hear from constituents who are genuinely confused about what are the options available to them. They really don't understand between hope, between east-west, between the possibility of rent-to-own, between having land to put houses on, between derelict houses that you're doing an audit of to understand where they do not understand. And I can't help them because I confess to you that I also am not clear on how do I help them understand what are the solutions, person by person by person, that I can send them to. I do hear a lot. I have an application in at NHC for 20 years. And they're not clear. Notwithstanding all the work that you're doing, I think that there must be an effort to make that transparent to the people of Barbados, because otherwise all of your hard work, which I know that you're doing with good intent, will be in vain. Is there some plan to, in one place, on one website, in some clear way, help Barbadians to understand what is available to them, how long they might be expected to wait, what are some of the costs that might attach to some of these? How can people know with certainty what they can expect?
Thank you, member for Christchurch, for St. Michael's South Central. The reality is, you know, we sit and we create plans, and you're right to some extent. If we don't share the plans, or if we don't have the plans out there on a website to show people what we're doing, it becomes an exercise in futility, because we're only speaking to ourselves. Recently we sat and we discussed the same thing, whereby we have to show the country where we are building houses, what the roll-up plan is, what the designs of the houses will look like, when to expect them. And I will assure you that within 2 months or so, or probably less, you'll see that master plan that we have on paper, showing parish by parish how many lands we have available, how many lands, the 567 lands to be vested in Hope, what is the roll-up plan for Hope. And I must admit, if there's one entity that has shown their master plan, and I expect Hope to be producing this on their website, that's Hope, because Hope has a clear master plan as to how their houses will be built, when they will be built, what the designs of these houses look like, and you are preaching to the converted. So I share your point of view, and I agree with you that we have to show the public the work that we are doing in terms of the master plan. And I am prepared to share with the member for Christchurch South. You can come to the Ministry of Housing, and soon from now you will see it on our website. The Ministry of Housing, National Housing Corporation website should be up within a few months. I don't want to say the date, because the general manager and his team, they are working on it. But you are absolutely right. We should have designs to show people when these houses will be built, where they will be built, what they look like, what the cost is, and a roll-up plan. And you are absolutely correct. And that will happen. That is what we're working on, not just aspiring to, but working on it.
I look forward to that, Minister. Thank you. My final question, again, is another one of transparency. In 2016, I met a man in Britain's Hill who had indicated that he had applied to, had shown interest in one of the housing units at Valerie in 2016. He never heard anything back. People have moved in and out of the units, several units, including many people from outside of what I would consider the immediate catchment area, including people from areas that boast of having some of the largest housing estates on the island. That man is now living in a container in the area. And thanks perhaps to the kindness of the management eventually of the NHC, who intervened when the officers of the NHC, probably because this is a matter of policy, having discovered that he was living there, flagged to have him removed from the property. Now, this is a man who is, for all intents and purposes, now homeless, having applied 9 years ago to live right up the street from where he has lived for many, many years and where he grew up. You will understand the angst and the sense of disappointment that a person feels that in their own community, they have to live on the street while people come from wherever to occupy units that in their minds should be available to them. Now, this is one Barbados. So I am not going to suggest that there will never be times when somebody because of fire, because of emergency circumstances, may not have to be located to one of these areas. This is one Barbados, and I'm not in this business of an MP getting this and an MP getting that. I don't get it. The people of St. Michael South Central get it, not me. And I would really like us to remove that from our language, because the individual MPs in here do not get things. We represent people. And I pass that man every day, trying to live his life in that container. Many years ago, he made an application, and since then, people from all about, by a process that I confess to you, I do not understand, end up permanently in those units. Can you shed some light on that for me?
Member for St. Michael South Central, I share your pain. I understand what you're saying. And perhaps while I don't want to formulate any answers for NHC with respect to why that individual is not in a unit, there may be answers, yes. And I am not sure if the person is working, because NHC's focus, because it's not emergency housing at Valerie, NHC focus would be on placing persons in those units who indeed can pay rent. While I understand where you are coming from, and I would be first to raise my hand to say this gentleman will be accommodated at what's the house name? Worrell House, because that seemed to be an emergency housing issue, because Valerie is rental units, and indeed I know NHC has failed to collect their rent over the years. Persons owe them at least last year $9 million in rent, and yet we walk around, some persons, oh, my unit not getting fixed. And I didn't raise that today because I'm not here to say because of this didn't happen. But at the end of the day, we must be able to be in a position to be self-sufficient, and if not self-sufficient, reduce the losses of $9 million. That's why HOPE was formed, because we recognize that NHC has been losing money, failing to collect rents, but yet persons living free. So at some point in time, NHC has to say to the public, I am placing persons in these units that were built for $27 million at $651 a square foot. We have to recover some of this money. And I think that that is where they are. I'm not finding excuses, but that is the reality. We need emergency housing, and we have to move swiftly so that those persons that you are speaking about, and I'm not certain whether the person is working or if the person is unemployed, but I'm just using that as an example to say how NHC has been run over the years by successive governments. You mentioned 9 years, and I'm not putting no excuse for my administration either. I look at NHC finances, and I see that NHC, the revenue NHC generates, and the expenditure is 100% more. The expenditure is probably 100% more than the revenue. So when persons can go into school halls and talk about shut down hope and keep NHC going, they don't understand what is happening. They don't understand the dire situation, the losses that NHC have mounted up over the years. And I am happy for a forum just like this, to let the public know that NHC has been operating at tremendous losses, and we have the figures. And I don't want to go into the figures this afternoon, perhaps tomorrow when I'm wrapping up I can say it. But this is not to take away from the honorable member's question, because it's a fair question. You do not want to see your constituents living on the road in this country. And indeed, we need to push and get emergency housing up and running in this country as fast as possible. And that is my mandate. I raise my hand. I'm leading the charge. This is my team. And I vow that Warren House should be, once the acquisition comes through, it's by private treaty. And that's the fastest way to acquire something, by private treaty. Well, I shouldn't say that, because my dear good friend, Permanent Secretary, would tell me the Land Acquisition Act is the fastest way because it gives good title. And I don't want to get into that debate here. But Warren House should be up and running in less than 6 months. And Madam Member for St. Michael South Central, I am hoping that before then, and if he's not accommodated, he'll be the first to move in to Warren House. And I will see to that. My Deputy Permanent Secretary is making copious notes, and I am a man of my word, both to you and also the member for St. Philip North.
Thank you. Just as I make my closing couple remarks, though, to clarify, my question was really one of process, you know, with an example where I was using that individual. To clarify, though, that man, when I met him, was paying rent, which was the same amount of rent as the housing units at Valerie. And in fact, I was able to help him submit to NHC a letter from his landlord confirming that he had never missed a rental payment. So this is not a question of NHC's revenue, no. This is a question of process, and the process by which people living in a community have access to the housing units in that community. I already stipulated that I understand that this is one Barbados, and somebody from St. Joseph whose house was slipping may have to end up in a unit for some time. So I am not numb to that reality. But as a question of ongoing process, one looks and realizes, whoops, somebody is in the unit that somebody else had applied for years from that community. How are those people expected to feel? This is a matter of process. I will not ask you to answer again, but I will ask you to consider this, because it is something that we have to address, because I raised it because I don't have the answer. I can't defend it. So I brought it to this chamber for you to defend it. But I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield.